Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Faced with the truckers' insistence, the Canadian Prime Minister intends to use the Emergencies Act to expand the government's powers. It was declared that any company with a truck involved in a protest could be financially sanctioned. This is undoubtedly equivalent to the collective punishment in the current CCP regime, which has been used historically only by evil and brutal governments. There is also big news in America. Documents filed with the court by Special Counsel John Durham on February 11th confirmed that the Democratic National Committee, including Hillary's camp, had monitored President Trump on a scale and severity far greater than that of the Watergate scandal, but mainstream media played deaf and dumb. We will do a detailed report on our membership site. Okay, let's get into it. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced on Monday, February 14th, that he was invoking the Emergencies Act in response to truckers' protest.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
This is the first time in Canadian history that the federal government has activated the act. At a press conference, Trudeau said that the bill would be used to protect critical infrastructure such as borders and airports from blockades, and that the act would create a number of extraordinary temporary powers, including the right for banks to suspend or freeze the accounts of blockade supporters without a court order, and force crowdfunding platforms and cryptocurrencies to comply with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing laws. The Deputy Prime Minister in Canada, Chrystia Freeland, has announced a number of measures to reduce funding for protesters. Where company trucks are used for protests and blockades, company accounts can be frozen and their insurance will be suspended. The Emergencies Act replaced the original War Measures Act in 1988, but it has never been activated. Previously, Trudeau's father, then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, used the War Measures Act during the October crisis of 1970 when Quebec separatists kidnapped and killed Quebec Cabinet Minister Pierre Laporte. The act allows the government to take action when certain emergency and critical situations arise that certainly threaten the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, and they cannot be effectively addressed by any other Canadian law. Or when certain emergency and critical situations arise that seriously threaten the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada. The Canadian government's website states, if a state of emergency is declared, the federal government may regulate or prohibit public gatherings that could lead to a breach of the peace. Citizens can also be prohibited from traveling to or within designated areas or prohibited from using specified property. While these powers do not allow the federal government to command any other level of government or police force, the federal government can facilitate the coordination of law enforcement by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in controlled areas. The government can also designate protected places, take over public facilities and services, and direct any person or class of persons who are capable of providing the necessary services. Ultimately, violations of these orders can result in fines of up to $5,000 and or result in up to 5 years in prison. The premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Quebec stated that they don't support the Prime Minister's use of the Act. Alberta Premier Kenney wrote on Twitter that Alberta has a solution for its blocked border protest. He said, "We have all the legal tools and operational resources required to maintain order. The Act would add no relevant additional powers or resources." He also wrote, "I told Prime Minister Trudeau that Alberta's government is opposed to the invocation of the Federal Emergencies Act. He believes Trudeau will further fuel and possibly prolong the protests by doing so." Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson expressed that invoking such powers isn't needed in her province. She said, "I am proud of Manitoba's law enforcement officials and have full confidence in them to protect our communities. The proposal from the federal government to use the Emergencies Act is not helpful to the situation at the Emerson border. And Quebec Premier François Legault holds a similar view and said it is an unnecessary and divisive measure. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe said police already have sufficient tools to enforce the law and clear the blockades, as they did over the weekend in Windsor, Ontario. He tweeted, "Therefore, Saskatchewan does not support the Trudeau government invoking the Emergencies Act." Pierre Poilievre, member of Parliament for Carleton, criticized Trudeau for not following the world trend and for instead creating a political emergency.
Justin Trudeau has caused a political emergency. While the rest of the world and provinces across Canada are beginning to remove restrictions and mandates, Justin Trudeau decided to pile new ones on, targeting truckers' livelihoods. And now he's got protests right around the country.
The solution is actually very simple.
The solution is staring him in the face. All he has to do is listen to the experts, do what other countries are doing, and that is to eliminate these mandates and restrictions to let the protesters, including the truckers, go back to their jobs and their lives.
Before we move on to the truckers taking Trudeau to court and how the Prime Minister is doing in the polls, many of you may have noticed that we have ads on this channel, Front Page International. That's actually one of the reasons why we started a second channel, because our main channel, Front Page, has been demonetized. YouTube won't run ads on it, so we don't make any money from those shows. We also started the international channel because the main channel of Front Page has received multiple strikes from YouTube, so it could be suspended by YouTube. The ad revenue from this international channel is really not a lot. In the past month, it just reached over $400. This is barely enough for one person's groceries, especially now with the high inflation environment. I want to be transparent with you. I want you to know our situation. We have a team of people here who put on the program daily, and we have studio lights to keep on. So if you are able to, please consider supporting us by donating to our donor box at donorbox.org/front-page or subscribe to our membership site at frontpageshow.com. Your support of Front Page helps us to keep telling the truth. Okay, let's get back into it. In a statement released prior to Trudeau's invoking of the Emergencies Act, the Freedom Convoy's legal representative, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, indicated that it would immediately file a court application seeking to overturn Trudeau's decision. Jay Cameron, who is Justice Centre Litigation Director, said Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau used the War Measures Act in 1970 to deal with violence, kidnapping, and murder committed by terrorists in Quebec. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is considering using the Emergencies Act to deal with bouncy castles and ball hockey. Bouncy castles and ball hockey refers to the peaceful behavior of these protesters. Cameron added, peaceful protesters who feed the homeless, shovel snow, pick up garbage, dance in the streets, play street hockey, wave Canadian flags, sing the national anthem, and set up bouncy castles for children do not seriously endanger the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, nor are these peaceful activities of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it. Brian Peckford, former Premier of Newfoundland and the only living author of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, indicated Canadians have the right to protest vaccine mandate policies.
It will be the truckers' representatives who will argue very hard with the political parties that this is an unnecessary action by the Government of Canada, that this is again a government overreach. We don't do these kind of things in Canada. We engage in dialogue. And it's my understanding that the Government of Canada has not reached out once to the truckers since they have arrived.
He noted that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not in an act of Parliament. It is not in an act of any provincial legislature. And that is what you must understand. It is in the Constitution. The Constitution means permanent values that cannot be changed overnight to suit the whims of politicians. These are eternal values. He also said that the rights granted to Canadians in the Constitution include Section 2, freedom of speech, religion, conscience, thought, assembly, and association, and in Section 6, the right to travel anywhere in Canada or leave Canada, and Section 7, the right to life, liberty, and the right to be heard, which is the security of the person. You can't give me anything like a vaccine unless I agree. And Section 15, the right of every Canadian to be equal before the law. Now, the Canadian government is trying to say that they can override those rights through Section 1 restraining orders. But Section 1 is only used for war, an uprising, or national threat or danger. It is not used to fight a virus that has a 99% cure rate and a lethality rate of less than 1%. The virus is not a threat to the nation. Article 1 is being used illegally by the Canadian government. Freedom Convoy organizer Tamara Leach said, "The protesters will continue demonstrating until their demands are met." Leach said, "We will remain peaceful, but planted on the Parliament Hill until the mandates are lifted." Several polls published this week found that Trudeau is facing a trend of declining support due to his handling of the ongoing Freedom Convoy protests. A Maru Group poll published on February 14th shows that 48% of Canadians believe Trudeau is not up to the job of being Prime Minister. 35% say that he is. Only 16% said that Trudeau's handling of the Freedom Convoy made them want to vote for him, compared to 63% who expressed negative answers on this issue. 53% believe that Trudeau has not acted in a way befitting a Prime Minister in the face of the protests. Both supporters and opponents of the protesters do not agree with Trudeau's handling of the protest. Opponents of the protesters believe the protesters are winning and that Trudeau's reaction makes him appear weak. 53% of respondents said that Trudeau looked weak when facing the Freedom Convoy. 17% said that he looked strong in his attempts to stop the protests. Another 44% said that they believed Trudeau had personally worsened the situation. Another poll published by Abacus Data and Spark Advocacy on February 8th shows nearly half of all respondents believe Trudeau should meet the protesters. The majority of the protest supporters, 88%, hold the same opinion. Next, I want to take a moment to read and respond to some of your comments. The first comment is from one of our recent episodes on Canadian truckers. I put the link in the description below. Stan Snigg wrote, "Truckers are standing up to tyranny, therefore we are truckers, unless freedom is not your desire. Thank you, truckers, for your courage that is lacking in our countries. I stand with the truckers because if you can't stand for something, you'll fall for anything." Thanks, Stan. Standing up for our rights is so very important. If we don't, then pretty soon you will see that they're gone. Mary Sanders commented, "We are now fighting communism on our own soil. Go, American truckers, we are with you. There is much to change in the United States to take back our freedoms and our country." Thank you, Mary. I totally agree with you. Everyone does deserve the right to be heard. Our most dangerous threat nowadays is the tyranny that is being brought on us all, and much of this tyranny comes from the Chinese Communist Party. And Demi Torres wrote, "I don't think it's true that residents complain about the honk, because on the other side you say they bring food, gas, etc. Residents of Ottawa used to complain for 2 years about COVID mandate and nobody listened to them." Thanks, Demi. Many support the truckers because the truckers are in a key position to wait out the Prime Minister, but this issue is far from over. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to like and subscribe this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.